Pope St. Peter. Pope St. Peter, the first pope, was his brutal execution under Emperor Nero's persecution of Christians. According to tradition, Peter was crucified upside down on Vatican Hill because he believed he wasn't worthy to die the same way as Jesus. This happened during Nero's violent crackdown on Christians, who were falsely blamed for the Great Fire of Rome in 64 AD. As the leader of the early church, Peter's death marked the first martyrdom of a pope, setting a powerful example of faith and sacrifice. Before his crucifixion, he reportedly continued preaching to fellow believers, showing unwavering courage. His death site later became the location of St. Peter's Basilica, making his martyrdom a foundational moment in Christian history. This event not only sealed his legacy, but also inspired future generations of believers facing persecution. Peter's willingness to die for his faith remains one of the most defining moments in the history of the papacy. Pope St Clement I faced his darkest day when Emperor Trajan exiled him to Chersonesus, modern Crimea, a brutal prison camp where inmates often died from harsh conditions. According to tradition, Clement miraculously struck the ground to reveal a freshwater spring after seeing a vision of a lamb, saving fellow prisoners and converting many locals. His martyrdom came when Roman soldiers tied him to an anchor and threw him into the Black Sea, attempting to erase both his body and influence. Remarkably, his body was later recovered with the anchor still attached and brought back to Rome for veneration. Even during persecution, Clement wrote letters promoting church unity and humility, leaving a lasting legacy as both a martyr and a voice for early Christian harmony. His courageous death and enduring teachings made him one of early Christianity's most respected leaders. Pope St Sixtus II met his brutal end on August 6, 25 AD during one of Christianity's most dangerous periods. While secretly celebrating Mass in Rome's catacombs of Calixtus, Roman soldiers stormed in and arrested him mid-service. Emperor Valerian had ordered the specific targeting of Christian clergy, and Sixtus was beheaded right at the altar, along with 4 of his deacons. His famous last words, "I will not abandon my spiritual children in this crisis," showed his courageous leadership. The Eucharist elements remained unfinished on the altar, creating a powerful symbol of persecution. 2 more deacons were executed later that day. This shocking event, where the Pope was killed during worship, became one of early Christianity's most remembered martyrdoms. It demonstrated both the extreme dangers faced by clergy and the unshakable faith that kept the underground church alive during Rome's crackdown. The site of his martyrdom became sacred to later generations of Christians. Pope St Sylvius faced his darkest days when Byzantine politics violently ended his papacy. In 537 AD, General Belisarius physically dragged him from the Lateran palace after he refused Empress Theodora's demand to restore a heretical bishop. Sylvius was first exiled to Patara, then to the deserted island of Palmyra, where he slowly starved to death. A cruel, drawn-out martyrdom, unlike the quick executions of earlier popes. What made this especially tragic was that his replacement, Vigilius, Theodora's chosen candidate, became recognized as pope while Sylvius still lived, creating an unprecedented conflict. This shameful episode showed how imperial powers could brutally interfere with church leadership. Sylvius's suffering lasted months on Palmyra before he died from deprivation and harsh conditions, making his one of the most painful and politically charged martyrdoms in papal history. His stand against heresy despite imperial pressure became his lasting legacy. Pope Gregory VII faced his darkest hour in 1084, when his bitter conflict with Emperor Henry IV reached its climax. After years of power struggles over who controlled church appointments, the investiture controversy, Henry's troops invaded Rome and besieged Gregory in Castel Sant'Angelo for months. The Pope's eventual rescue came at terrible cost. His Norman allies brutally sacked Rome, burning buildings and killing civilians while freeing him. Forced to flee with these controversial protectors, Gregory spent his final year in exile in Salerno. Even worse, Henry installed his own antipope, Clement III, while Gregory still lived. The once powerful reform pope died broken but defiant, reportedly saying, "I have loved justice and hated iniquity, therefore I die in exile." This dramatic standoff marked both the peak of papal authority claims and the harsh reality of medieval power politics. Pope Boniface VIII suffered his most humiliating moment during the Anaghi outrage of September 1303, when his political enemies brutally attacked him in his own palace. French soldiers working for King Philip IV and Italian rivals broke into the 68-year-old Pope's bedroom, slapping him, threatening him with knives, and holding him prisoner for 3 days without food or water. They tried to force him to resign as pope while keeping him in miserable conditions. Though local townspeople eventually rescued him, the physical and emotional trauma proved too much. He died just 1 month later. This shocking event, known as the Annecy Slap, marked a turning point in church history, showing how much political power the papacy had lost. It directly led to the Avignon papacy when future popes became controlled by French kings. The attack demonstrated that even Christendom's highest spiritual leader wasn't safe from violence during Europe's turbulent medieval power struggles. Pope Urban VI's reign collapsed due to his own violent behavior, creating the worst crisis in church leadership before the Reformation. Shortly after his 1378 election, the same cardinals who chose him turned against him because of his notorious temper and cruel treatment of clergy. In an unprecedented move, they declared his election invalid and appointed Clement VII as a rival pope, creating the first official anti-pope in church history. Urban responded by imprisoning and allegedly torturing some of the rebellious cardinals. His stubbornness split Christianity for 40 years in what became known as the Western Schism. When Urban died in Rome in 1389, most European rulers recognized his rival instead. This self-inflicted disaster began when Urban, the last non-cardinal elected pope, alienated his supporters through paranoia and brutality, proving how personal flaws could endanger the entire church. Pope Pius VII suffered the ultimate humiliation when French revolutionary forces captured the 81-year-old pontiff in 1798, marking the darkest moment of his papacy. Dragged from Rome as a prisoner, the frail pope endured 18 grueling months of captivity while being paraded through French towns like a common criminal. Napoleon's troops moved him between prisons, weakening his already poor health. His suffering ended in Valence, France, where he died in 1799, becoming the first pope in over a millennium to die outside Italy. The French government added insult to injury by burying him without proper Catholic rites in an unmarked grave. This shocking treatment demonstrated how completely revolutionary France had rejected papal authority. Pius VI's tragic final years symbolized the Catholic Church's dramatic loss of political power during the turbulent Napoleonic era, when even the Pope became vulnerable to secular forces. His captivity remains one of the most degrading episodes in papal history. Pope Pius XII faced his most difficult test on October 16, 1943, when Nazi troops rounded up 1,000 Jews in Rome just steps from the Vatican. While he never publicly condemned the deportations to Auschwitz, historical records show he secretly ordered churches and convents to shelter Jewish refugees, saving thousands of lives. This painful silence created lasting controversy. Some argue he should have spoken out more forcefully, while others believe quiet diplomacy prevented greater Nazi retaliation against Catholics. The Pope likely feared that open protest might lead Germany to occupy Vatican City or harm more Jews and Catholics. Today, historians still debate whether his approach was cowardly or strategically wise during this impossible situation. This moment captures the terrible moral dilemmas faced by religious leaders under Nazi rule, balancing public condemnation against behind-the-scenes rescue efforts. Pius XII's actions remain one of the most examined and debated chapters in modern papal history. Pope Francis faced one of his most difficult periods in early 2025 when his declining health became impossible to ignore. During his final Easter Sunday blessing, millions worldwide watched as the 88-year-old pontiff, visibly frail and struggling to speak, delivered what would become his last major public address. Just days later, he passed away, marking the end of a transformative but turbulent papacy. This poignant moment capped years of challenges, from serious health crises including major intestinal surgery to fierce opposition from traditionalists over his reforms. His progressive vision for the Church had drawn both global admiration and intense criticism, particularly regarding clergy abuse scandals and liturgical changes. The emotional Easter appearance became a powerful symbol of his perseverance, as he continued serving despite obvious physical limitations until his final days. This period highlighted both his determination to modernize the Church and the significant resistance he faced from conservative factions. Thanks so much for watching. I genuinely appreciate you taking the time to check out this video. Like if you enjoyed and if you feel I missed any important historical popes, controversial figures, or saints you'd like to see covered in a future video, definitely let me know in the comments below. Your feedback helps shape the content, and I read every single suggestion. Also consider subscribing for more, and also am having soft tacos for dinner tonight. Hehehe.